الله أكبر الله أكبر.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Islamic Center at New York University podcast, coming to you straight from the heart of New York City. We're building an amazing Muslim community here at ICNYU where everyone is welcomed and respected no matter where you're from or where you're at. This is the place to be. So open your ears and your heart and come along with us on another life-changing journey. Bismillah.
Bismillah. Bismillah walhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So last week we started looking at the first hadith in this hadith collection, the 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi. If people want to just pull it up on their phones. This hadith is a very well-known hadith, and it's the first hadith that starts a lot of different books. It's called the Hadith of Intentions. It says, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, that indeed actions are by their intentions. And we read through the hadith in its entirety. Today we're going to try to get through the entire text of the hadith. And just to recap from last week, we broke down what are the different parts that make up a hadith, the isnad, the matan, the chain of transmission, the text. We talked about the word hadith itself, what that means. In the first sentence of this hadith, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, we translated what the meaning is of each of these words. And the crux of our conversation last week focused on the word amal, and why that was something that was important, the idea of deeds and actions within the framework of our religious tradition, and how that fundamentally is the only thing that you're really taking with you when you go from this world, are just the actions and deeds that you have, right? May Allah make the best of our deeds the last of our deeds, and let not any one of us meet Him other than in a state that is most pleasing to Him. So if somebody who has the hadith pulled up wants to just read it in its entirety again, and we're going to delve a little bit deeper into the meaning of this hadith, its relevancy, and its application in our lives. And as people kind of trickle in, we'll get into more discussions and things about parts of it. But to somebody who have it pulled up, can read it in the Arabic, and then we'll read it in the English. It's just the first hadith in the 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi. Okay, you want to read the English first? Go ahead.
On the authority of the commander of the faithful, Abu Hafs, Umar bin al-Khattab, who said, I heard the Messenger of Allah say, these are only by their intentions, and every man shall have only what he intended. So one whose hijrah, emigration, was to Allah and His Messenger, his hijrah was to Allah and His Messenger. But one whose hijrah was to achieve a worldly aim, or to a woman he would marry, then his hijrah was to that for which he emigrated.
Jazakallah khair. Does anybody want to read the Arabic? It's okay if you're not comfortable with it. It's fluidity. It's fine. So you want to get into the habit of kind of reading it, trying to memorize it piece by piece, especially the foundational hadith. Not so that you're rotely memorizing them, but so that they're there as kind of opportunities of implementation from sticking to like the words, right? They become not just slogans, but essentially like guiding principles, philosophy on life. So in this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he says, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ إِمْرٍ مَا نَوَىٰ فمن كانت هجرته إلى الله ورسوله فهجرته إلى الله ورسوله ومن كانت هجرته لدنيا يصيبها أو امرأة ينكحها فهجرته إلى ما هاجر إليه. That indeed actions are by their intentions, their motivations, and each individual will have that which they intended. Thus, whose migration is for Allah and His Messenger, His migration is for Allah and His Messenger. And he whose migration is for something of the world, or for a woman to marry, then his migration is for that which he migrated. Right? And the kind of reason of this hadith is rooted in the instance of a companion who's making hijrah along with all the companions. The hijrah is they're leaving from a place to go to another place. They're migrating now, right? And there's two major migrations within Muslim experience. They migrate in the early periods of revelation from Mecca to Abyssinia, where there's a lot of persecution, and they are seeking just a free place to worship Allah. So the Muslims in the early period of Islam, they're sent to live under a Christian king, the Najashi, in Abyssinia, what is modern-day Ethiopia. And it's an incredible thing that you want to think about deeply, because also for a lot of these people, the first time they've left from a predominantly stratified society that is run by elite tribalistic clan system of Arabs, and they're now in a kingdom that is run by Africans. It's all black people. And just to experience that in and of itself and understand that in terms of what that's like is an important thing to delve deep into. But that's the first hijrah that we kind of have. And then the second hijrah is when they go from Mecca to Medina, right? And the Prophet establishes the city of Madinatul Munawwara. And so the companions, they ask about this instance of a woman named Qais. And there's a Sahaba who is going to marry this woman. And so they're asking the Prophet, and the Prophet is giving us now these scenarios. And today we want to focus on this part of niyyah, intention, but not in a way that quite often gets given to us, right? Like live with intention in a very platitudinal way, but to distill that in terms of how do you actually build that out concretely, and what does it mean to have this? إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, that indeed actions are by their intentions. And we said the ba last week, and if you missed it, you can go online, listen to the podcast. But the grammar there is in two ways. This ba is a word by itself, right? And there's so many different ways the word ba is used grammatically in Arabic. So even when you say Bismillah, right, there's like such depth in what we're saying just with the ba in Bismillah that is not like hard to understand, but you want to like actually take steps to understand it. So this ba has like two kind of broader understandings. There's a ba of companionment here, right? That these two things go together the way like companions go together, right? Actions and intentions go hand in hand. Do you know what I mean? And there's a ba that is of causality, that it is because of this. You see? And so here, it's giving us three different categories. You do it for God and His messenger. You can do it for dunya. You could do it to marry a woman, right? It's three separate kind of states that all have the same manifestation. The form, the outward, takes on its kind of similar manifestation, but the inward is what's different. So in order for us to align with intentionality that renders now accepted action, right? A solid intention that goes hand in hand with a solid action. It's not that the outward in and of itself is good enough. This becomes a challenge because you could do things for the wrong reasons. There's hadith that say the fires of Jahannam will be ignited by a person who was a scholar of Islam, a person who gave a lot in charity, a person who was a soldier in the battlefield. Seemingly from the outward, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. That's good. But the inward is where it's lacking. So the person who was scholarly, they just wanted people to tell them that they were great because of their knowledge. The charitable person was looking to be praised for their charity work, right? The person who is a soldier in the battlefield, right? It's a challenging thing that the measurement of it in and of itself has to be rooted in the assumption that I have the capacity to actually play a role in determining why I do the things that I do. That it's not just something that is beyond my ability. Do you know? So if I asked you, why do you study what you study? Why do you work where you work? Why do you want the things that you want? And to distill that for yourself to its base foundational block of information. Most of us don't know why we do what we do in the ways that we do them. Sometimes it's just very habituated, right? And this is all rooted in this hadith, innamal a'malu binniyat, that your actions are by intentions. So there could be a ton of actions that you carry out that have no fundamental intention to them. They're not the ones that are going to be the key entry points into Jannah, right? When you're standing in front of God and actions are being assessed, you don't want to just pray with a body, you want to pray with a heart and pray with a mind. You don't want to just give charity mindlessly. It's meant to be a spiritual act, right? There's meant to be inward transformation. How can you align intention to be correct if there's not an understanding of, well, how do I build intention in the first place? How do I render consciousness and awareness and wakefulness in what it is that I'm doing? Does that make sense? Does it? So how does one do that? How do you build that sense of awareness and wakefulness within the course of what it is that you're doing? The goal is to not live with hypervigilance that creates paralysis, that has an overt level of unhealthy self-scrutinization. But the idea is, in a good crux of what we're doing in the course of the day, I know why I'm doing what I'm doing before it is that I'm getting it done. But I also now have a framework to be able to assess, am I actually going in the direction that I had intended to go in? So how do I start to bring that level of consciousness and presence to what it is that I'm doing, right? And why do I want to do this? Well, I mean, think about it. Could you willfully gossip about someone for the sake of God? Can somebody engage in domestic violence truly in these three categories that are just even outlined in this hadith? Whoever makes hijrah for Allah and His Messenger made it for Allah and His Messenger. Whoever did it to achieve some worldly thing or to marry somebody, then they did it for what they intended it for, right? Can I fundamentally engage now in processes that are damaging other people's lives or hurting my own life with willful intention? And there's people who are just pure evil people. Do you know? If you ever watch the documentary 13th, for example, you read the book The New Jim Crow, Prison Industrial Complex, there are people who, on the record, advisors to President Nixon, the lead office of the entire country, who affirms intention through what their strategy was. We couldn't get people to hate anti-war activists or hate black people, but we knew that if we could associate hippies with heroin and black people with crack cocaine, we could influence public perspective on them. And then they create a war on drugs, which is a war on black people. They can't call it a war on black people, but the guy is telling you, this is what we intended to do. They sat in a room like this, and they created a strategy that said the only thing that's going to happen is a bunch of black people are going to go to prison, and there's going to be a bunch of cops that also beat up hippies. And that was something they were willfully able and committed to seeing as a necessary component to their retainment of power and privilege. The intention is to achieve dunya. This is what the hadith is saying. They have a willful intention that's there. Do you get what I mean? Does that make sense? So people can bring consciousness and strategy to doing all kinds of horrendous evil things, right? And what they take advantage of is a population that is deeply without wakefulness, is stuck just in automatic default settings, is in a place where you are looking at yourself but not for yourself. So what I'd like you to do is just turn to the persons next to you, introduce yourself if you don't know names. How does one go about in increasing this thing of intentionality? How do I increase consciousness, wakefulness in my day-to-day actions? There's certain things it's a blessing that I don't have to have presence in, but there's a reason why this is a hadith that starts pretty much every book of hadith. And it's something that is not meant to just be rotely memorized, but implemented and actualized. This is what makes you different. There's certain things that make us different from the rest of creation. From an outward level, you have been given the gift of language and words. It's pretty much the only thing that makes you different from the rest of animals. You sleep the way other animals do. You eat the way other animals do. You engage in physical intimacy the way other animals do. There's all kinds of things that you do, that you have needs of, that animals do. They cannot communicate the way that you do. You have been given a different capacity. Inwardly, there's also different capacity. You have similar physiological makeup, but there's not intellect the way you have intellect. There's not the ability to perceive the way you have the ability to perceive. So what I'd like you to do is turn to the persons next to you. What dilutes this quality and what enhances it? What is it that makes it like super awake? And what is it that makes it something that is blurred, right? Why does it feel weird to eat food the day after Ramadan ends? What is giving you that sense of consciousness at that time? Think deeply about it. Don't trivialize it. Think deeply, because it's all connected to some of these bigger issues, right? When you can actually be mindful of whether you should put food in your mouth or not, you're going to be mindful of what your role is in ensuring that there's consequences to people who kill black people in the streets. But when you're not even thinking about the food that's going in your mouth, it's going to not necessarily put you in a place where you're so aware and awake to other things that are happening, right? So we want to know what the blocks are. What is it that builds it up? What is it that breaks it down? So if you turn to the person next to you, what dilutes this consciousness that's necessary and what enhances it? And if you could talk for a few minutes, and then we'll come back and discuss. But go ahead. Okay, so what are some of the things we're discussing so far? And people want to move in like towards the middle. That would be helpful. Just we could, like, what enhances this thing of consciousness? What enhances this thing? What dilutes it? What did you discuss? What gets in the way? Why don't we start there? What can dilute, like, our presence, our awareness, our consciousness? Yeah.
The society's expectations of us and people, just like the world around us is constantly telling you to want things that you don't necessarily need and like prioritize things in a way where it leaves very little room for you to think beyond yourself. So not that these things are like inherently bad, but if, for example, like people are just like wrapped up in like what house I'm going to buy, what car I'm going to drive, my health insurance, and this, like, everything is just like geared towards like the self, and that's like and honestly, like, that blurs the wakefulness, and to really step out of that, one really has to take a step back and realize that even like during the time of the Prophet the beginning years of Islam, like, it was only like a handful of companions that were with him, but those are the people that they became role models for us, right? They set the precedent for us. So, I think it's just the world around us definitely like blurs our wakefulness.
Okay, and how does it do that tangibly, or why does it do that, right? And you want to distill these things, because the minute somebody can control your heart and your mind, they've got you. Somebody controls your body, it's very different. You look at psychological methods that are utilized in the most grotesque of ways. Slavery in this country is very purposeful in having our black brothers and sisters naked, eating from plates, the leftover food from animals being fed, being called boy, having their names taken away from them. The idea is to create a psychological shackling, a psychological manipulation, right? you build within yourself through socialization, hearing again and again and again. If somebody tells you every single day of every week of your life that there's nothing good with you unless you're married, you're not going to think there's anything good with you unless you're married. The man whose book we're studying, whose name is known around the world for centuries, did not get married. In terms of the life that he lived a very just simple life. Your prophet slept on straw mats, did not have a huge house. I'm not saying you shouldn't have a huge house. You want to have a huge house? Allah bless you with the biggest house, man. I'm saying you don't know why you want the house. And there's a difference between you wanting the house for the sake of Allah and His Messenger, or praising Allah for it, versus you wanting the house because you think you're a bad person if you don't have a big house. You think you're lesser of a person if you don't have a child or a car or certain clothes that you wear. This is where the crux of this comes, that you're not living now through intentional living. You're living through a negative core belief structure that says, if I don't have X, then I'm not good. Do you get what I mean? It's the entire opposite of what the Prophet ﷺ seeks to instill within his people. Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. The most elevated amongst you is the one that has the most taqwa. The verse doesn't say the most elevated amongst you is the one that has the most babies, the one that has the most wealth, the one that has the most... It doesn't say these things are bad. There's literal companions who are described that when their caravans of wealth entered into the city of Medina, it would just take like tons of time for this whole thing to be able to pass through the city, you know? Like the way that it would move. People had a lot of wealth. Uthman ibn Affan was very wealthy, right? Abdurrahman ibn Auf was very wealthy. That's not the idea. But the idea is to sit down and think, why do I want it so badly? What is it that's going on in me? And do I perceive inadequacy in myself? And this is where Allah and His Messenger becomes a key category to understand, because you stop seeing yourself the way God sees you. You see yourself only the way the dunya wants you to see yourself. Then you have to chase in a consumer-driven society after things that can create more frustration, right? The hadith that says you give the child of Adam a mountain of gold, then they seek out a second mountain of gold. It could be about greed, but also just about an absence of happiness. I thought one gold mountain would make me happy. It didn't make me happy. Maybe the problem is I need more gold, and then I'll be happy. No, man. The problem isn't that you need more gold. That's not where happiness comes from. It comes from in here. And this is why niyyah is not just on the tongue. It's in the heart and it's in the mind. You live with a certain intentionality. What else dilutes this thing? What else gets in the way? Or what can enhance it? What did you discuss?
In terms of enhancing, kind of went over how we have, mashallah, we already have these systems in places, like phrases to say before actions, and after actions, like Bismillah before eating, Alhamdulillah after eating. I think that's one slice of it, and then another slice of it to really enhance that consciousness is like breaking down those phrases. Like what does Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim actually mean? What does Alhamdulillah mean? And kind of like why the Prophet said these things.
Yeah, there's a dua before pretty much every act that the Prophet engaged in. Right? These are sunnah du'as, we call masnoon du'as. There's barakah, blessing, and memorizing them. But what you also understand principally is that before the Prophet did anything, he knew why he was going to do what he was about to do. There's intentional living there. Right? There's presence, there's consciousness, there's awareness. It's not just running on autopilot. And so you take a moment. If I was to utter a prayer before I ate, before I sleep, before I go on a journey, before I walk into the mosque, before I walk out of the mosque, what is necessarily happening in that moment? I have to be able to take a pause to do that thing. I'm not just moving as a body, I'm finding stillness and I'm breathing. This is why Allah and just the utterance of Allah, even in Bismillah or Alhamdulillah, right? The alif comes from the back, the lam necessitates a full mouth, and the ha is aspirated. You're literally breathing when you say God's name in Arabic, but you're bringing breath into your life, stillness into your life. So it's not just kind of regurgitated, I'm just pecking at the ground like a rooster. I'm finding an opportunity to separate and just take a minute to bring some intentionality into this. What's really going on here? Why am I doing this? Do you see what I mean? And to catch yourself. What else? Anything else that we discussed? Yeah.
In the same way that taking those small moments to pause helps you be mindful and conscientious, I think taking larger moments throughout the day to pause and pray salat and reflect on the movement of the day is a great way to remain steadfast and conscious of what you do and why you do it.
Amazing, right? And so we're going to talk about all these things in a little more detail right now in the frame of building intention, right? Intention isn't of itself something that you only do prior to an act. But what we're just talking about right now is built in as a deep spiritual practice within our tradition. It's called muhasabah. The word hisab in Arabic, like if you went to a restaurant and you wanted the bill, you'd ask for the hisab. Right? So it's got the word in there, hasiba, right? Can everyone see that? It's a little faint. This is essentially like an inventorying. So intention in and of itself is not just, now I'm going to step, now I'm going to do that. It's too simplistic of an understanding of what we're talking about. You want to tap into all of your organs of cognition. To think about intentional living is also not without the reality that I'm a created being, but I was made for eternal existence. Don't play a game that is just about day-to-day measurement, but understand yourself in an entire life journey that you're living. So that you're now not in a state of assessment that renders little bits of growth and has a limited capacity of vision. You want to have foresight. And so what muhasabah does is that at the beginning of the day, the end of the day, you are in a place where you say, what will make this day good? And at the end of the day, you assess, how did things go in this day? Do you get what I mean? And you can then think, what got in the way from me getting able to get done what I wanted to get done? I wanted to go to the halakha on Monday night. What really made it difficult for me to get to there? What messed up my intention from it? Well, there was like this random rainstorm all day that was taking place. Great. That obstacle is something that gets in the way that is outward. But you want to start to assess that certain things that are perceived as outward obstacles are in reality internalized obstacles. What is getting in the way? If intention lives in the heart, is expressed on the tongue, is necessitating a presence of mind, then if I got fear in my heart, I got anxiety in my heart, you're not always not living your intention because you're just a bad person. Don't give shaitan victory over you. But there's things that get in the way. It can be intimidating. Why am I not fasting on Mondays and Thursdays? It's literally sitting in the place. There's going to be iftar. What's getting in the way? Maybe I don't think I'm good enough. And when I'm inventorying, I can be honest with myself. This practice of muhasabah, that's just all that it is. I'm taking into account, what did the day bring? What did the week bring? The reflection into a notebook is a lot better than just empty reflection, because you today are still you, but you're not the same you are today that you were a year ago.
And in order for you to recollect what you were a year ago, a year lived later, you need to have something that allows for you to access your authentic self from a year ago, from when you were actually a year ago. Not this version of you remembering it through everything you've had, experienced another 365 days in totality. Does that make sense? So you take out a notebook and you write down, and you're like, hey, what happened today that was good? What happened today that was not good? What's going to happen that makes tomorrow a little bit better? I'm bringing more presence. What got in the way? Maybe I shouldn't eat like a ton of sugar before I go to sleep, and Fajr won't be as messy as it is. Maybe I can see that hanging out with that person last night was really great, and I got to unload a bunch of stuff in my heart. I laughed in a time that I haven't laughed in so long. I was with people who weren't making fun of other people as the primary way of us socializing, or gossiping, or backbiting. I went to volunteer. I prayed all 5 days of my prayers. Like, it creates an opportunity to start to distill, and you're in a place where vulnerability is something that's important. Is something wrong over here?
It's just a low battery.
It's not plugged in from the back.
Good. It's fine. Do you see what I mean? But you need to have an assessment metric that isn't just about, I put the intention into play prior to, but I look back to say, did I actually fulfill it? And then be comfortable enough. For this to work, you need to have an understanding of self that is not rooted in delusional understandings of self, superiority or inferiority, that are rooted in that consumer-driven society that Anwar is talking about, that has you now in these delusional senses of comparison, right? I'm better than everyone. I'm worse than everyone. I'm greater. I am not so good. This delusional sense of grandeur or insignificance is going to make that inventorying harder when you are trying to assess, did I actually get done what I intended to get done? And life can catch you up, man. It's not just about, I want to wake up for Fajr tomorrow. It's 10 years into your career, you saying, I had said if I got this job, that I would start giving some money to people in need. It's been 10 years. I haven't given anybody anything. What's going on? Am I actually owning up to that intention that I said I was going to? But I can start to do that by just regular engagement of it. What you want to have is a comfortable sense of self rooted in interiority, that I'm not in competition with anybody else. I'm just in a place where I'm trying to get to the best version of me that I can be. I'm not afraid to meet who I can be tomorrow. This is what the gift of intention allows for you to do, to be bold enough to actually live in your own shoes. Not based off of what whiteness wants you to do, what anti-blackness wants you to do, what a traumatized, colonized community wants you to do. You are just trying to do what God and His messenger wants you to do. And all they want is what's best for you. They're not trying to make you into super Muslim on steroids, where everybody's got to stand up and suddenly turn into the Sharia police, saying that I've memorized every verse. That's not even the point of all of it. Most of the companions didn't memorize too much Quran. They were just living intentionally with an understanding that I have a God that's watching over me, not just watching me. It's much easier to live in pursuit of validation of that God than God's creation that makes you think in these buckets. Some of you have heard me talk about this before, but it's important for us to understand it in light of what we're talking about here. We all function now through processes of socialization in ways where we have what's called a core belief structure. And this builds itself into intermediary beliefs. My handwriting is so bad. And then you have what's here are the fruits and actions, behaviors. What a core belief is rooted in perceptions of self. I am I am not. People are not. The world is not. Right? How you see you, how you see others, how you see the world. I am worthy of love. I am not worthy of love. I am beautiful. I am not beautiful. I'm worthy of success. I'm not worthy of success. People like me. People don't like me. The world is safe. The world is not safe. It builds itself into this level of intermediary beliefs, which sets itself up as rules and assumptions that then influences behaviors and choices. And people will manipulate this. So if I don't think I am beautiful, I'm not beautiful. And then I get to a place that starts to build rules and assumptions. If I was lighter skinned, I would be beautiful. And then there's behaviors and actions. Entire skin whitening cream that builds itself around the world, that makes people hate themselves. Is that living with good intention? No, it's not, right? But are we going to tell the person that has that mindset that they're a bad person? No, they're a product of that second category the Hadith talks about. That if you are migrating for the dunya, then that's what you're doing. And then I deal with the consequences of your intention. You are so ingrained in the pursuit of the world, you're willing to take away people's consciousness and make them hate themselves. And this is what it goes down to what Anwar is talking about before. Why do you need to have a big house? Why? It's not that there's anything wrong with it, but this is what our deen teaches us. Go have whatever you want. Just remember where it came from and think about what its pursuit is actually doing to you. If you let yourself believe that you are not the beautiful person that Allah made you, unless you fit into this rigid box of what the world says is good in its own sense of moral relativism, it's gonna screw up this thing of intention. And then you're gonna chase after things thinking that they're going to be what makes you happy, but then you could set yourself up for a rude awakening. Because I could put you in front of 100 people right now that nothing is categorically a blessing in their lives other than the gift of Iman. For some people, marriage is a big fitna. For other people, marriage is a blessing. For some people, family is great. For some people, family is hell. For some people, having kids is the best thing that ever happened in the world. For some people, having kids is something that they regret every single day of their lives. There's nothing that tells you that it could work well. What this religion posits is you just try your best. God is not going to ask you to do something that's hard for you to do, and if you struggle with it, there's more blessing in it for you than the one who could do it with ease. You just get up and try again and do what you can. You see what I mean? These things are going to get more in the way of formulating conscious intention than anything else, because they are going to run you into the ground exhausted, trying to chase after everything you chase after in the course of your day. Why do you need friends? It doesn't mean that you don't, but why do you have the company that you keep? Why do you pursue what you pursue? Dress how you dress, or don't dress how you dress. Do you get what I'm saying? And you can assess what this is by thinking about some of these things in terms of the rules and assumptions that you set up for yourself. And that sense of wakefulness, that consciousness, gets attached now to the a'mal that the hadith is talking about, that you're able to now approach it with a different set of perspective, a paradigm shift that says, this is about empowering me. This is about giving me a sense of growth, not confining me. I'm not just in a place where I have a checkbox that says I got the deed done, but I can actually relish the experience by allowing for me to be in a place where I do it with my heart, right? I don't want to think that I am a bad Muslim is the core belief I have in relationship to my intentional living of Islam. And if I was to ask most of you in this room, do you think you're a good Muslim? Do you think you're good with God? Do you believe in a God that loves you? And it's all still stuck in this core belief structure. Parents that yell at you, cultures that are different, that you're not a part of, that make you feel like you're not Muslim enough, like all kinds of things that get in the way. And all it's taking now is off the table, like set, pure intention that is rooted in what we call ikhlas, sincerity. Does that make sense? I'd love to hear what you all are thinking about what I'm saying. If you could turn to the person next to you, what are you taking away so far? And then we'll come back and discuss in 2 minutes. Go ahead. Okay, what are some of the things that we're talking about? What are we taking away? Just so I know that what I'm saying is sticking in a certain way. What are you discussing? What are we taking away so far? Yeah.
Something that we discussed was the idea of core belief, how oftentimes it's hard to even decipher what it is that we really believe about ourselves, let alone change it, just to even like know what it is that we believe about ourselves, and to then identify like where it's coming from, like who put that there or where that came from, because it's not always the case that we put it there ourselves, because like who would put a bad core belief themselves? And like on that point, like sometimes we don't want to admit that we believe a certain thing because of what that might say about us. So there's definitely this struggle involved when it comes to relating with our core beliefs.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's tough. You just gotta start somewhere, right? You just try your best. That's all you gotta do. That's why it's beautiful. The Prophet has companions, alayhi salam, who struggle with drinking alcohol. And he walks with them. He helps them. He doesn't push them down. He's there. He's their companion. He knows what role that plays. Do you get what I mean? He's got people that struggle with zina. He's got people that struggle with all kinds of stuff. What else do we take away from this? Yeah.
So something that came up in our discussion, and I kind of come up with 2 points is, you said that often sometimes we don't quickly realize how a lot of what we believe is just from the people around us or the people we hang up with. And then you mentioned intentionally thinking about certain things when it comes to religion. And I think like we often forget to put an intention on what we want to believe, and whoever like we hang up with, we just like, instead of putting an intention to decide if we want to believe something or not, just like go along with it.
Yeah.
Which can be like very, like it's very, you don't notice it until like some time maybe pass, or you never even notice it.
But this is like what we want to think, right? Like you're not a cow, do you know? Ulaika kal an'am, the Quran says, like that's what they're like. You just go with the herd, do you know? And you can be wired in that way, which is not a good or a bad, it's just how you function. But when you can separate and you can build a positive structure, this is why reading the Quran is important, because Allah tells you again and again how important you are, tells you like what your point of existence is, offers consolation, gives a sense of His love for you, tells you that you were made beautiful, is not something that is just by chance, right? You're wired in certain ways, but you have a depiction of the divine. How can you intend to do for Allah and His Messenger? The primary category of intention that is rooted in here, when you have subconsciously built a perspective of the divine that is not through His words, but from the words of the people that you interact with. You don't believe in the God of Islam unless you believe in a God that believes in you more than you believe in yourself. The God of this religion tells you that
He is not just watching you, but watching over you. His messenger tells you that God loves you more than a mother loves his child. The thing that gets in the way of building that firm intention is the unconscious formulation of who Allah is and Allah's messenger is, right? At this phase in your life, where you are at right now, when you live in a materialistic world, this is why bucket number 2 is the person who chases after dunya. Think about the number of people in your life, not because they're good or bad. Don't think in these simplistic terms. Everything is not always just good and bad. Just think about it as objective reality. How many people do you know that get up and make hijrah, leave from one place to go to another, purely for pursuit of things of the dunya, things of the world? I'm going to get up and leave for this job. I'm going to get up and leave for this degree to get a job. I'm going to get up to leave to this degree to get a job so I can get married. In these ways, at the expense of their Islam. I go live in a place where there's no Muslims. I go live in a place where I have to hide my religious identity. I go to a place that builds immigration policy that bans my countrymen from coming here. Do you get what I mean? For the sake of dunya, I'm able to move, stay up, pull all-nighters, study until I can't think anymore, do whatever it is I can. You will fight with your parents to marry the person you want to get married to in ways that you are not fighting for the sake of your heart. It doesn't mean that that's a bad thing. It means that you have demonstrated, though, your capacity to stand in pursuit of something that's meaningful for you. So you got to make your inner self that meaningful to you. This is why intention is so important, because it is the root of the acceptance of actions that we put into the world. And the world wants you to be a zombie. It wants you to be a consumer zombie. It doesn't want you to be a contributor. It wants you to just consume and consume and consume. It wants you to think happiness is rooted in what it's selling to you. And what our religion is telling you, no, man, sometimes happiness is just being able to sit down with your boys and watch the stars come out at night. Smiling can just be a charity. Sometimes happiness is just finding light in someone else's glowing face looking at you. You know why when you live in tall buildings in this city, in every hotel, they put mirrors near the elevators? Because when they didn't used to have mirrors, people would complain at the long elevator wait times. When they started putting mirrors inside the elevators and outside, complaints stop. Because people just stand and look at themselves. It tells you to be infatuated with your outward, but to be in denial of your inward. The first hadith that's in most books is, hey, don't forget, anything that you put outward is only accepted based off of what's happening inwardly around it. How can you do for the sake of Allah and His Messenger if you don't know who Allah and His Messenger are to you? Do you get what I mean? You can't just do it because mom and dad said to do it. You got to dig deep and say, like, hey, who is my divine creator? Who do I believe God to be? And not in the reverse end of it that creates the same conundrum. You pick up the Quran, read what Allah said to you about who it is that He is. Don't just go in aimless conjecture that also then justifies and validates what is the other challenge that's here. That the intention has to be good and the action has to be good. They both have to be good and not relative to me, but they have to be good in what Allah has said this is what goodness is. And there's a lot more room in terms of what is permissible than is impermissible. You just got to be able to recognize it from its foundational level. Many of you in this room who have experienced Ramadan know that the day after you stop fasting, it feels strange to put food into your mouth. You have awareness for moments. It means you have the capacity to have intentional aspects of what is typically mundane. You don't want to lose that. when you forego what you can only do for the sake of Allah and His Messenger, which is devotional acts in pursuit of bucket number 2, which is what? The dunya, then it's going to tell you, it's okay to not pray because class is happening. It's okay to forego your salah because you have a meeting at this time. That's not how it works. What you're diluting then is the wakefulness that comes only through these spiritual exercises. As the hadith continues, we want to think about the 2 categories that are mentioned specifically, because the Prophet could have said anything, but he purposely adds in the category of what is materialistic, worldly existence, the dunya. If somebody is moving for the dunya, then they are moving for the dunya. You want to be able to take a pause and say, what is the root of my intentional living? Am I getting up and living to pursue what it is that I was initially created from and am going to return to? And I can't take all of these things with me. The only things that I can take are the a'mal that have righteous intention to them. And so you want to take some moments to pause, think about this in terms of what the hadith is telling us. The role of intention is very particular in certain ways. The only thing that's differed between the 2 sunnahs of Fajr and the 2 fard of Fajr is the intention. You pray it exactly the same way. And so in devotional acts, it changes things. In acts that are non-devotional, it can take the mundane and turn it into something that is a source of luminosity, illumination. You're not going to get it right 100% of the time. That's not the idea. If Allah wanted you to be an angel, He would have made you an angel. He purposely made you somebody who can make a mistake so that you can recognize your ability to make mistakes, so that also you can recognize other people will make mistakes. Can I tell what is inside Jazakallah khair, of myself? Most of us don't even know why we do what we do. How am I going to know why you do what you do? How can you then walk into a place with intentionality that says, I know exactly why you are not a good practicing Muslim. And I can tell you that it's within my jurisdiction to comment now on your dress and to pull at your sleeves and to tug at your scarf and to make all kinds of annoying sounds at you. You don't know what people go through, man. You don't know what people have been told since they were little kids. You don't know what's going on inside of them. And you don't want your words to be what breaks them even further. When you do for the sake of Allah and His Messenger, why intention and action go hand in hand is because both things have to be right. Not just righteous in the sense of self-righteousness, but they have to be right in every which way. The right time, the right place, the right words, the right content. So the default is silence as opposed to speaking. And you can't then justify a bad deed through an intention that you thought was right. And when you distill it down, are you advising that person to inflate your ego, or are you advising them for the sake of what is actually their benefit? Do you get what I mean? Does that make sense? Show me a hadith where the Prophet says, I don't really care what you do with this information. I'm just telling you so that when I stand in front of God, He won't send me to hell. In most instances, when things weren't going right, the Prophet thought he was the reason as to why revelation stopped, not somebody else. He saw himself as being a cause of perhaps there being difficulty for people, not blaming people, saying that you're the reason as to why these things are happening. In every which way possible, you want to bring that sense of intentional living with simplicity. And you know what the best thing is? If you're just a nice person, then you don't really have to keep your intentions in check so much. 90% of it is just going to be done well. But if you're a jerk, then you got to be ready that a lot of what is outward is going to be assessed by what you brought inwardly to it. And if you're trying to get an ego trip by pushing somebody down. Do you get what I'm saying?
Okay, what I'd love for you to talk to each other about, just a couple of minutes. Why do you think this is like a foundational hadith in our tradition? Why is it something that is so emphasized? If we were to think about the purpose of this religion, like what it is that Allah is giving to us through this, why is this something that is fundamental? Innamal a'malu binniyat. Indeed, actions are by their intentions. If you want to just turn to the people next to you, because you want to incentivize for yourself, right? The implementation of prophetic counsel is not something that you want to leave to chance. But as you have maturation in your own life organically, revisiting these words at later stages should be bringing about different meaning. And not just thinking about them in terms of absolutes, but in terms of this is something that is purposefully crafted for us at any stage of our life, as well as our relationship to faith, observance, practice. It's like a very critical message in this hadith. Like why? Why is this something that's so important for us to understand? If you can just talk to the people around you for a couple minutes about it, and then we'll go into some practical things, and then we'll pause so people can kind of just be in community with each other over iftar. But go ahead. Okay, so what are some of the things we could say? Like, why is this such an emphasized part of our tradition? You know, there's people who say that this equates to like half of knowledge in Islam. You know, a third of the religion, a fourth of the religion, a fifth of the religion. There's a lot of emphasis that's put on this particular hadith, innamal a'malu binniyat. Like why? Why would this be something that one could make these claims around? Yeah.
I think the reason that this is such a foundational hadith in our faith is because it works in tandem with another foundational belief in our faith, which is that God is the most merciful. And as a reflection of that attribute of God, we must think that it's a great mercy that we are judged by our intentions and not our actions. Because God recognizes that we fall short, and by extending us the mercy of judging us by our intentions, He is in a way embodying His mercy.
Yeah, right? Like in this hadith where the man kills 99 men and he then says, "Can I be forgiven?" He's not told yes, he's told no, you can't be forgiven. And so the guy who tells him you can't be forgiven, he kills that person too. Now he's killed 100 people and he speaks to somebody who's known for having more wisdom. This person says, yes, you can be forgiven, but you have to leave from this town and move to this other town. And he sets out on the journey, doesn't make it to the second town. The angels come now and they argue that he should go to the pits of Jahannam because he didn't make it to the second town. He should be taken to Jannah because he was on his way to the second town. And they ask Allah, and Allah says if his body is closer to the first town, then take him to the fire, the town where he had committed these atrocities. If his body's closer to the second town, then take him to the gates of paradise. And they measure and they see that it's closer to the second town. In some of the narrations it says the body's actually closer to the first, but Allah of His mercy makes it seem as if the distance to the second is shorter, right? He didn't make it, he just intended and he set forth, right? The intention in and of itself is what it is that is the motivating variable behind this. Like you got to get up and try. There's one thing that you didn't achieve from a lack of trying versus you tried and it still didn't get done. Do you get what I mean? Right? And this is where you have like a gift. There's a hadith that is narrated by a man by the name of Wahab ibn Munabbi. And in this, it just talks about the gift of intention, you know, that Moses looks in the tablets and he sees people mentioned in the tablets. And again, he's asking Allah, like, make this my ummah, Musa alayhi salam is saying. And Allah keeps saying that this is the ummah of Ahmad, right? Meaning like our ummah, the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And embedded within these words is this notion that you intend to do a good and you didn't do it, it's still written as if you did it. You carry forth on the intention of doing good, then it's written for you tenfold over. You intend to do a wrong and you actually do it, then it's written for you once. And if you intended to do a wrong and you kept yourself from doing it, then it's written as if you did a good deed, right? Like the gift of niyyah in and of itself. You know, and this is an important principle to understand concepts in relation to each other, not in isolation of each other, that here exists intention, here exists prayer, here exists family, here exists inheritance, here exists livelihood. You can't compartmentalize the way society has you leave your Islam at the door when you walk into an office place or you go into a place of work, or some of you even when you walk into a place of prayer. You have to leave behind salient parts of your character because the place you go is not like the culture you're a part of. So you have to leave behind your racial, ethnic, cultural identity, right? You have to leave behind your socioeconomic identity in order to just kind of find presence and belonging. It doesn't work that way with Allah, right? He looks at your heart and your actions, not just the forms and the bodies. What else, like, could we say this hadith speaks to, or why it's important? Like, why is this such an often mentioned foundational hadith? And it's important to think this way because when you hear something so much, you would say, I got it, like I get it, to the point that you then stop acting upon it. Do you know what I mean? So what else would make this something that stands out, that it's so emphasized as being one that you should learn it? It's the beginning of so many different books. What did you discuss?
I think it's also different because intention is invisible, like you cannot see people's intentions, right? So if this hadith gives us like a lesson to know that it's not important to just look on the outside and what's actually done, because someone can do a good deed, but like his intention is to just be recognized and feel the feelings in front of everyone. But the intention is invisible, it's something on the inside. So I think it maybe make us reflect and think, and that we don't need to judge people with that, like the outside. We need to know that the inside is different.
Yeah. He's telling the companion, it all looks the same. The only place that is different is inward. But that's not for you to assess. Allah is the only one that's going to judge that. You want to base things off of the best of intentions from yourself, which doesn't mean you justify things that make no sense. People today have done the opposite of what needs to happen. We make excuses for people's terrible behavior. You turn your face when someone is abusing someone. It's not our deen telling us to do this. You know that a father mistreats his daughter. You know that a neighbor mistreats their child. You know there is inequity and oppression. Your best friend is not treating that girl well. That doesn't make it okay for you to start saying, I don't know someone's intentions. That's not what this hadith is saying. But when you get to a place where you see somebody walking down the street and you butt your nose into somebody's business on the things that you should be minding your own business and the things that you should not be minding your own business, you're too much involved within your own self. Do you see what I mean? Does that make sense? Right? The manifestation of the act has to be something that also understands gradations of certain things. Right? What else? What else do we take from this before we talk about just a few practical things? Yeah.
Promotes like equality because we all come from like different backgrounds and resources and like knowledge. So we're judged on our intentions, which may like manifest in completely different ways.
Yeah. You don't have a God that is judging you based off of your country of origin, your cultural heritage, these kinds of things. The thing that you are going to be assessed on is going to be inward. And it creates now a equitable sense of understanding that didn't necessarily fall into what the theological premises were of a Meccan society at that time. Forget about even like contemporary society, right? What does like the doctrine of manifest destiny really speak to? Do people know what manifest destiny is? What is it?
Oh, it's how they justified moving like westward expansion and like slaughtering like indigenous people all across this continent.
Yeah. These guys came in and they committed genocidal violence in this country, saying that God wants us to do this.
This is our right. You have prosperity doctrines that are rooted in similar mindsets. The theology of this tradition is something that says all of you are going to have a common source of judgment. Every single one of you is going to have assessment that is going to be uniform across. There will be individual accountability. Allah knows circumstances in ways that we don't know. So judgment is in His wisdom, not in our wisdom, limited in capacity. But you are going to be still in this place where the rich don't get out of something just because they're rich. The privileged don't get out of something just because they're privileged. If anything, they're more accountable because they got more stuff to be assessed on. You see what I mean? What I want us to think about is a few practical things now that can get in the way of this. Think about when it's hard for you to exert consciousness in your day-to-day exertions. If you are sleeping very little, are you going to have ease in living intentionally? No. So when you're looking at prophetic guidance, to be in a place that says, well, what's the benefit for me to live with wakefulness and consciousness? What is the alternative? I'm inundated with emotion, so I just eat my pain away. It's not good or bad. It could be, but you're just numbing, right? It's not helpful. It's putting a Band-Aid on it. When you don't sleep so much, it renders more irritation. It renders ease of frustration. You get to a place where you're more argumentative. Doesn't make any sense. My child, I love her to death. When she does not sleep, the words that come out of her mouth, I don't even know what she's talking about. I went home and my baby girl, some years ago, not like now, she's 10, but even now, mashallah, right? When she's little and we're sitting in some place and I don't even know, it's like 2 a.m. Yeah, we were in a hotel. I was speaking at a conference and they came with me. And it's 2 a.m. Our flight was delayed so much. And I walked in to the hotel room with them and went to get some food because we were sitting in an airplane on a runway for 6 hours. And when I got out of the hotel room, I heard this noise and I went back in. My daughter, she's looking at me like more angry than I've ever seen her face. And I was like, baby, what's wrong? She's like, you always leave us and go places. And I was like, I went to get you food. She was like, no, you're just going to leave us here in this place. And I was like, I didn't leave you anywhere. You were here with me. And my wife is looking at me and she's looking at me. And I'm like, Medina, what's going on? And she's like, I don't even know, Baba. Everything is just blah, 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 blah. How can you live with intention when you're 30 or 40 and you've now had 30 years of just bitterness, harsh life experience, friends that betray you, people who judge you based off of bullet points on your resume, members that are filled with khutbahs that tell you you're more prone to hellfire than anything of mercy, that sets and encrusts your heart with all of this heaviness, and you're telling me that sleeping in the way you sleep is going to help you live with more consciousness? The food that you eat, you want to think about it more mindfully. Literally, what hardens your heart on a physical level is going to harden it on a spiritual level. Your physical wellness is attached to your mental, emotional, spiritual wellness. Bringing exercise into your life so you're not just sitting sedentary. These things impact the inward and the outward because the outward impacts the inward. Finding moments of deliberate stillness to be able to just reflect, to synthesize, so that you are not just experiencing the world as a body, but you can live intentionally because you take with all of your organs of sensory perception. When was the last time you remembered something just from the smell of it, from when you were a child? It's still there, but how many memories do you have attached to scent from when you're an adult? And it's not because you stop smelling things, it's that you stop smelling them purposefully, consciously. When was the last time you sat and just listened and experienced something through your hearing? Allah gave you the ability to hear for a reason, and you want to move now and transition from just eating to tasting, to hearing to listening, right? You don't want to just see, you want to perceive. And all of these things will impact how you can live with consciousness and intentionality. Does that make sense? The heaviness that gets in the way, the things that are just plaguing your heart, anxieties, stresses. Who do you go to talk to? Who do you open up to? Who carries some of your burdens? That doesn't allow now for perpetual negative thoughts that are running you into the ground to be what's defining and dictating your decisions. So much of what people choose to do is in response to heavy feelings these days. And then you're not choosing a choice that's about what's for foresight, but it's how do I not feel this pain anymore? And the alignment of the intention can be skewed in certain ways. Do you know what I mean? But as a starting point, as we go through the remaining 41 hadith in this collection, this one is going to be the basis of so much. And so you want to start to gradually build it in. The note of actions attached to it is just like any other virtue or value. The way to increase it is through the virtue, the value as a vehicle itself. So you want to increase in consciousness, then you just have to be conscious. Just like if you want to be more patient, the way to be more patient is by being patient. So don't live mindlessly, live mindfully, and think about what contributes to the mindlessness of things versus the mindfulness of things. So choose intentionally. Who do you spend your days with? Who are you not spending your days with intentionality? What spaces do you frequent? Which ones do you not frequent so much? And then juxtapose it to the two things that are being contrary to the idea of doing for God and his messenger. What am I really doing that's just about the pursuit of this world as a finite? And this is the trick of modern day secularism. It's not that you live in worlds that have no conversations of God. That's not what secularity yields in a contemporary setting. What it yields is the idea that this is just all that there is. There's nothing after it. So all you're going to do is chase after dunya. Because what else am I going to chase after? So the alternative is no, I'm like a person who aspires to be an inheritor of paradise. I want to be from the warithun of Jannah. May Allah make us from amongst them. But you affirm it for yourself. You think about it for yourself. Is this what's there? Like dunya, dunya, dunya. How much of my day is just about dunya? How much of my day is just about materialistic gain, materialistic possession, materialistic notoriety, materialistic fame and wealth, and all of these kinds of things? And then the third part to it is how much of it is attached to just finding a place where I'm not alone. Which people could tell you this part of the hadith and say, you know what? Too many people, they just live because they're trying to find a partner. But you want to remember who God and his messenger are, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You don't want to be in a place where you are imposing now other people's insecurities that yield these negative core belief structures. Why would Allah want you to be alone? Why would Allah's messenger want you to be alone? Before I was married and I was single, I had the added difficulty of everybody knowing I was single. And I would be the one invited to speak at all places around the world, including panels on marriages, where they would say, talk about what it's like to be single. And quite often, I'd be on these panels with people who were married, and they would say the dumbest stuff, man. They'd say things like, you don't know what it's like to be married, and you're just chained down, and those of you who are single, you should enjoy your freedom. And then I'm a pretty shameless human being. So I would get on the microphone, and I would say, I'm sorry, but that was the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. You don't know how hard it is to be alone. And the kind of idiocy that people put in your face.
Don't you want to get married? Yeah, it must be because I don't want it enough that's why it's not happening. But the whole idea is that shaitan manipulates us at our insecurities. So if you can understand where Allah and His Messenger play a role and recognize that when you know Allah is with you, you're never alone, then you don't have to be in pursuit of something that you already have. You get married on your terms, not in a root of a negative core belief. You don't make people feel like garbage just because they don't have a ring on their finger. That's dumb. But in being able to think about the intentionality of it, I'm not pursuing this because I'm incomplete. You're already a whole human being. You're not two halves that make a whole. You already exist as a full person. But how many people's decisions are rooted in this? This is how the world functions, whether it's Muslim or not. You make certain money, you get a certain job, a certain degree, credential, this and that, just so you are potentially the best suitor possible. That's what they're selling you on, right? In cultures across the board. You got to have all of this stuff lined up so that you check off every box to be somebody who's marriageable in this way. It's like, no, man, you're already good. Don't let the doubt have an entry point. And it's beautiful that the Hadith mentions this specific thing, because most of us know people, if not ourselves, who this thing creates such a frenzy for us, right? They can really skew the intention of what it is that we live through. Do you know what I mean? Think about the Hadith in its entirety. When we meet next Monday, we're going to look, probably we'll be set up on that side, so we can get into other parts of the Hadith now. The second Hadith is the Hadith Jibra'il. It's very long. We won't go into too much detail, but I want to start to show you like aspects of Hadith grading, Hadith classification. What does it mean that a Hadith is Sahih? What do we mean when we say a Hadith is Mutawatir or a Hadith is Gharib? What does that mean when we look at like the chain of transmitters and a Hadith tree that shows us like all these things and how they function, so we have more of a hands-on relationship with it and can really like look at like subhanallah the beauty of this mechanism that is isnad, how it functions and allows for us to take from a very well thought out formulated system as we get into like the crux of it. So before next Monday, read like Hadith number 2, but read it in a way that's not just surface level. Read it in terms of like, what can I really extrapolate from this? What are things that I never noticed before? Write some of it down. And I'm going to tell you this, some of you won't do it. You're not going to do it because you think you're not the person that's supposed to do it. Somebody else is supposed to do it. You're going to say, this is weird, right? But once you get the hang of it and you start to actually engage, it's going to make the religion feel so different. It's going to make the relationship with faith feel so different. And so my suggestion, open it, read it sentence by sentence, have a notebook, and just write out, like, what is it saying to me? What are things I didn't notice before? So that you're ready to come, because you know I'm going to ask you to talk to the people next to you and share back. You don't want to have an intimidated relationship with your faith. When you really love something, you want to talk about it, right? And look at all the idiots that talk about this religion so much and make people feel miserable about it. If good people like you started talking about it, it would turn the world upside down. So you can't be scared to talk about something that you love. And in your love, if you say something that was a mistake, it's okay, man. You said it out of love, inshallah. Allah knows your intention. We'll just kind of remedy where we need to. Do you get what I mean? And then also look at this hadith. Spend some time thinking about it. What's the point of this? What's its basis for me? How do I live with intentionality? How do I start to increase? What are the things that are diluting for me subjectively? My awareness, my wakefulness. What are the things that enhance it, where I have deeper senses of perspective because I'm more present in what's going on, right? Do I notice the things around me? Do I not notice them? Do you get what I mean? And then we'll start from there next time, inshallah. We'll see everyone next Monday, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
We hope you enjoyed our podcast. If you're inspired by the work that we're doing at the IC and want to help keep it going, subscribe to our podcasts, follow us on social media, donate to help support us at ICNYU.org, and most importantly, keep us in your continued du'as. Until next time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.